Good morning, friends. Welcome back to Sniffy's Petcast, your bi-weekly dose of positivity. I'm your host, Howard.
Hello, everybody. I'm Ting, co-hosting this podcast with Howard.
Hey, Ting. I know that you recently moved to a new place. How is everything?
It's all good. I think Chubby was a little bit nervous at the beginning, but now I think he's totally fine.
Yeah. I think it will take some time for pets to get used to a new environment. I still remember the first time when I moved into my college apartment with my cats. It took them about a week or so to get used to it.
Oh, really? So how did you know they were not used to it at the beginning?
I noticed that they didn't eat much food and always stayed at the corner. There are some other weird stuff, so I couldn't remember, but I noticed that they're not acting normally. And then I brought them to the vet. They did some basic checkups, and the vet told me that your cats are good. Just give them some time to get used to the new environment. So before, I didn't realize that the environment can affect our pets a lot.
Yeah, I really didn't realize that much either. Did the vet tell you more about how changing environment affects our pets?
No, she didn't. But we are lucky because we have Greg here with us today again. Greg is a certified dog trainer with more than 10 years of experience. He also has a degree of animal behavior. I believe Greg can share with us some good insights on this topic. Welcome, Greg.
Hi, it's good to be here. So absolutely, when pets move into a new environment or their environment changes, it can have a lot of different effects on them. Their behavior can change, of course, as they're adjusting to a new space, or maybe there are different things that they are seeing and smelling and hearing that they're not used to. So sometimes we see their behavior sort of reflect on that, and other times it can, at a different level, affect their sort of health and well-being as well. So definitely a lot of factors come from the environment regarding how our pets are feeling and acting.
I'm wondering from your perspective, how does environment affect our pets, say, behaviors or mental health or physical health? Can you share more details with us?
Definitely. So when it comes to behavioral issues, a lot of times what you'll see from the environment is sort of our pets reacting specifically to certain things. So if a lot of times, in my experience, when people come to me because their dog or cat has a behavior they don't like, a lot of times the first thing I'll do is look at the environment to see how can we change the environment to help this behavioral issue. So things like if your dog is barking all the time, or if your cat seems really shy or scared of new people, things like that can absolutely be affected by the environment. In another sense, an animal's mental health can be pretty significantly affected if they, for some reason or another, don't feel perfectly comfortable in their environment, whether that is they aren't able to have a quiet place, or they aren't able to, sleep or hide, anything like that, in a way that they want to. If they feel like they don't have much control, that can certainly affect their mental health and can cause some more broad stress sort of signals that you see in them. Certainly their physical health too, in addition to the mental health, they can be sort of linked together. Again, just sort of the general stress can weigh on an animal. As you mentioned, they might lose their appetite, like your cats when you moved into college. They could lose their appetite. Sometimes you see things like urine or scent marking from dogs or cats. So certainly, broad spectrum, the environment can affect our animals in lots of different ways.
I see. So do you have any examples or stories of your students or clients, their pets were affected by the environment?
Certainly. Probably the most common sort of issue that evolves from an environment that I see is when dogs develop a sort of reactivity or high sensitivity to uh, seeing other people or other dogs. A lot of times that comes from seeing or hearing people outside, looking out the window, barking at them, and just sort of builds up this stress inside of them. So, a pretty common example is dogs barking out windows that I see a decent amount. So, there are several ways you can address that, but one of them is definitely environmental management, figuring out a way, generally just blocking a dog's view from looking out the window one way or another is a pretty simple environmental fix for that. Another really common one in cats, kind of like I mentioned before, they might mark outside of the litter box or just go to the bathroom not in their litter box. And that's probably the most common behavior in general for cats that I help with. And that has to do with, where is their litter box and how often is it cleaned, how many litter boxes compared to how many cats. So certainly that is a huge thing that a lot of cat owners struggle with is sort of litter box and bathroom behaviors. So, again, you can usually fix the problem without having to interact with your dog or cat at all. You don't have to get a clicker and treats. You don't need to bring them to a class or anything. So that's sort of how I think of environmental training, environmental management is if you can help the issue without really having to directly interact with your pet.
Since you mentioned cats, I have an interesting story to share with you guys. There was one time my cat peed on my bed and I was so upset. I was like, "Why did you do that? I just cleaned your litter box." And then I went down my bedroom to check my cat's litter box and I found that my dog actually peed on my cat's litter box. So I was thinking, maybe that's the reason. So I cleaned up the dog pee and then moved the litter box to another place. Then my cat started acting normal. He went back to the litter box and do his business there. So what you just mentioned makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, absolutely. There you go.
Yeah, I also want to share that. So, like what Howard mentioned at the beginning, I moved to a new place recently. And for the first several days, I found that Chubby was peeing near the couch in the living room, which he would never do before because he's house trained very well. So I was very surprised and confused.
Yeah. Like I said, that's a huge behavioral issue that a lot of people,
Yeah.
ask for help with. And, to get into more specific details, we can certainly do that. Regarding cats, like I mentioned, the location of litter box can be really important. So, every cat is a little bit different. So there's no rule that every cat wants to follow, but especially it can change too if there are multiple cats or if it's just one, whether they want to sort of have their litter box tucked away in a corner where they feel more private, or if they want it to be a little bit more open because cats don't want someone to sneak up on them. So they want to be able to see everything around them. So the simplest thing to do is just put out a few litter boxes in lots of different locations and see where your cat has a preference. And that sort of links into a broader environmental topic, which is giving your animals freedom and choice and letting them sort of decide how and where they want to do lots of different things, whether it's going to the bathroom or sleeping or playing. So that's a little bit more of a specific answer for cats.
I really like the idea of giving your pets choice and freedom. It makes sense to me because as humans, we also want choice and freedom, right? So, yeah. So far, we have talked about a lot of environment stressors for our pets. But, Greg, I'm curious, how do we know if our pets are under stress due to their current environment? What are some signs and the potential long-term effects?
There are sort of broad things you can look for. If an animal seems sort of depressed or like they're not really engaging with things or losing their appetite, again, like you mentioned, those are some more sort of broad signals that something isn't quite right, and it could very well be the environment. Probably a more specific thing to look for if you're thinking about your animal's living space is if you see behaviors sort of displaced. So your pet is doing something that could be normal, but not at a normal time or not for a normal reason. That could be an indication that their environment is a factor. They don't feel like they have an appropriate way to let that behavior out. So again, going to the bathroom in the wrong place, that means they're, for some reason or another, unsatisfied with where their toilet currently is. So, that's the first thing I would think of is, a behavior that doesn't seem appropriate in this time or at this location. Other things like if a dog is chewing on things excessively, or barking a lot, those, again, it's normal for dogs to bark, but depending on how and when they're doing it, that could tell you a little bit more.
Is barking at night a normal behavior or it's weird?
So that's a great question. Barking in general, 95% of the time, barking is a result of some kind of stress. Whether it's stress that your dog is, scared that somebody they don't know is coming towards them and they don't like it, or if they want to pick a fight with another dog that they see, if they are, defending their territory sort of thing. Again, barking is a normal behavior. It's dogs communicating and expressing, but it's usually a result of that sort of stress. So if your dog is barking at night, then the first step would be to figure out where that stress is coming from, whether it's, if a loud truck drives by or, you hear your neighbors outside. Maybe your dog was sleeping and they just got startled and that's why they're barking. So it's certainly, a normal behavior, and it just sort of figuring out why they're barking would be step one.
Right. So it's very important to first figure out why they are barking. Is it because of the environment or any other reasons?
Exactly.
It's interesting because from today's discussion, I learned that, sometimes we don't need to train our dogs to solve their behavior issues. We can just simply modify or change the environment, then the behavior issues will be gone. But remember from our last episode, we talked about how basic manners can solve dogs' unwanted behaviors. So Greg, I have a question for you. How do we know if the behavior issues of our pets can be solved by training or just changing the environment?
That's a very good question. I think that's a time where professional can certainly step in and give their ideas and insight. Personally, for me as a trainer, my first option is always seeing if we can change the environment first. Because if we can do that, it is usually a lot faster and more successful than if we were to try and change the behavior of our dog.
Right.
Because so I'll use the example from before of barking out the window. As I mentioned, that is from some stress for some reason or another. You could certainly take the time, work with your dog. If you figure out they always bark when the mailman comes, you could work with your dog and desensitize them to somebody coming to the front door and ringing the doorbell. You could, if your dog is looking out the window and they see someone coming, you could absolutely work with your dog to desensitize them and change their behavior. Or you could close the blinds. So that's a really common situation because a lot of times it is context specific. Your dog's home environment. A lot of dogs are very happy and friendly to meet people out on a walk. but if that same person is walking past your front window, it feels different to our dogs. So,
Mhm.
Wow.
Oh, the barrier, right? The barrier
Exactly.
frustration you mentioned before.
Exactly.
Mhm.
So, anyway, to get back to the first point, deciding when to work on the environment and when to train your dog directly can sometimes be a matter of how quick do you want results
Mhm.
and like how much time you are willing to take to work on this behavior. That a similar sort of pattern comes across from lots of different behaviors. Another really common one is if a dog or a cat will dig through the garbage or like unroll the toilet paper roll in the bathroom or something like that. Again, you can put the time and effort in to train your dog or cat and work on those behaviors, or you can get a garbage can with a lid on top. So,
Right.
so that's usually my first line of defense is if we can manage the environment, the owner is happy with that solution, let's do it.
Wow, that's very eye-opening. Before our discussion today, I always thought that the only way to solve our pet's behavior issues is through training. But I didn't realize that we can simply just change our environment and those unwanted behaviors will be gone. That's very interesting.
Yeah, I feel like it's either your pet suffering from the environment or you suffering from the environment because you have to change it to the way you may not be used to.
Right.
But I mean, I believe it's always easier to change our environment comparing to really training our pets to reduce unwanted behaviors.
That is so true, Ting. Hey Greg, you say that our pets will show some abnormal behaviors because of the environmental stressors, such as going to the restroom at the wrong place, barking, or chewing up things. I'm wondering, do you have more examples of those behaviors?
Definitely. A lot of it has to do with the owner's preferences as well. So, another pretty common example is if your dog or cat is sleeping somewhere you don't want them to, on the bed or on the furniture. So that can be a situation. The sort of things that make a little bit more sense, chewing, going to the bathroom. But then sometimes there can be broader sort of displacement behaviors that can indicate stress, which may be from the environment or it may be from something else. But your dog chasing their tail, as an example, where they are trying to, like, they have this feeling welling up inside of them, and they just have to let it out somehow. So they start chasing their tail and running around in circles, or just chewing or licking themselves excessively in any regard. That can be a sort of a broader indication of stress, and it can be due to the environment from overstimulation, from looking out the window or hearing sounds like the doorbell. If those factors build up over time, that can be sort of a long-term effect. Is dogs can get really, really excited really quickly and easily, and then it sort of comes out in these weird, inappropriate ways. Sometimes somebody might ring the doorbell and their dog just starts spinning in circles because they just have so many emotions associated with the doorbell ringing and someone coming in. Maybe they're friendly, maybe they're not, but it's just a lot and it can be overwhelming. In a broader sense, you can see other behaviors that don't really make sense in this context. And it can vary from dog to dog and situation to situation. So there's not necessarily a list of things that you should look for and check off. But if you just see your dog doing something and you think that's weird, it might be worth thinking about, why are they acting this way?
I see. I have a question because my cat can stay in front of the heater for hours. I was thinking, isn't that hot? So do you think it's a normal behavior or like cats just like the heater or like the warm air?
Yeah, that is sort of like I mentioned before, animals having choices of where to be is really important for their physical, mental, emotional well-being. So if your cat was in a small room and there was a heater that was really hot all day and they couldn't do anything about it, that could be really stressful. But if your cat could be anywhere they want and they choose to be in front of the heater, that's great.
I
They
see.
have the
Yeah.
option. So yeah, the choice and having variety in the environment. Yeah, I don't know. Cats, they seem to really enjoy that. I always feel like I would be hot if I were them, just
Yeah.
with a fur coat already.
Yeah.
So,
Right, right.
but yeah, that
Yeah.
choice is really helpful if they have options, and if they feel cold and want to curl up in front of the heater all day, that's great.
Got it. I see. So the context and whether they have choice is really important for us to understand whether they are under stress or not.
Right, I think it totally makes sense. Just like humans, if we would be given choices to choose from, I believe life will be definitely easier most of the time. And here I want to share another story of Chubby. So I found him oftentimes scratching his mat or his bed before going to sleep. I'm not sure if it should be called weird behavior. And when I removed the mat or his bed, he would just stop the scratching behavior.
Yeah, that is a really good example of that sort of displacement I mentioned.
Yeah.
So part of that also ties into just genetically, dogs, their wild counterparts, wolves and other, wild animals who are used to sleeping outside. And, to a certain extent, a lot of dogs also sleep outside. So that is a behavior where they are trying to make the ground comfortable for themselves. Yeah, that can definitely be an indicator that for some reason or another, Chubby is trying to get comfortable.
Maybe he doesn't like the carpet?
I feel like dogs don't even always have a goal in mind when they do that. Sometimes it feels like it's just their instinct coming out to scratch the floor before they lay down. So not necessarily that he doesn't like the carpet or his bed. It might be an indication that he does like sleeping there and he's just sort of getting it ready for himself.
Okay.
Either way, that gives us information that he's thinking about this place to sleep. Yeah, not necessarily a problem unless he's damaging your carpet or your floor.
Okay. So I guess I should return the mat to him for sleeping?
Yeah, he just thinks about that as a place to sleep. But yeah, that's a really great example and an interesting story.
Chubby's example reminds me of behavior I observed from my cat. If he doesn't like the smell of something, for example, his food, he will show this behavior as if he's trying to cover up the smell with cat litter.
Yeah, that is another great example. Cats are very particular about smells around them. They like to keep things the way that they like them. So, and it can vary depending on the situation. I'm thinking of the litter box. Some cats want to sort of keep everything uncovered as sort of like a scent marking behavior. But then other times, if it's something they don't like, they want to cover it up.
Right.
Or if they don't want anyone else to know that, they're here and this is their spot, then they'll cover it up as well. So yeah, that is another funny example of cats sort of interacting with their environment, saying like, I don't like this, I want to cover it up, even though they're not doing a good job of covering it.
Right.
So that's another sort of displaced behavior.
Wow, today's session is so informative. We talked about how environment can affect our pets, the importance of environment management, and some common environmental stressors and signs that indicate our pets are under stress. For the next episode, we will talk about how to create a friendly environment for our pets. See you next time. Thanks for tuning in today's episode. Your thoughts and feedback are very important to us, so please don't hesitate to reach out. Whether it's a story you'd like to share, a topic you're curious about, or you're interested in joining us as a guest speaker, please email to info@sniffylabs.com. info@sniffylabs.com.